A landmark day in American history as the Supreme Court votes to uphold the president's piece of legislation known as the Affordable Care Act. We have Mark McKinnon with us on remote in Austin, Texas. And Mark, we know that there's been strongly partisan reaction to this decision. Republicans in Congress are doubling down, saying they're going to vote to repeal, House vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act come July 11th. We talk about trying to find some kind of middle ground. Do you think anybody in the Republican Party is getting the memo? I'm going to pose that same question to former RNC Chair Michael Steele in a second. But from your perspective, is there any sort of navel-gazing right now happening within conservative circles?
Well, sure there is, because, first of all, this caught everybody by surprise. The conventional wisdom was going exactly the opposite way, so there's a lot of huddling going on right now. I think the first instinct, as often is with Republicans, is to jump on the notion that it's being framed as a tax now, and President Obama initially said it wasn't a tax, and now the court has affirmed that it is. So I think there'll be something generally headed in that direction. But it's important that the party recognize that, you know, what we're seeing through No Labels is that people really want to see problem solving from both parties. They want to see problem solving put above party politics, and that's a real key demographic for whoever's going to win this election. So voters are going to look to see who they think is really solving the problems that are out there. So Republicans have to be careful that whatever they're doing is not seen as something that's political, but that is actually going towards solving a problem. And that's the way they've got to keep the frame as they go forward on this issue.
Okay, given that, Michael Steele, we know that there's the repeal vote on the 11th, and of course, in a few hours, there are two votes, a civil and a criminal vote. A criminal contempt vote and a civil contempt vote holding Attorney General Eric Holder in contempt of Congress. Is this good for the Republican brand to be doing this on the heels of a decision by this momentous decision on the...
It's not about the brand. This is about getting in and getting out of this vote. I mean, they're very comfortable with this vote coming where it is because the focus, the first 3 quarters of our time has been on health care, and that's happening all across the country right now. This vote will happen. It'll be part of the conversation. Chris will definitely cover it this evening on Hardball. But again, the main focus will likely be on health care. And as far as the leadership is concerned, that's a good thing. I think Mark makes the more important point for the navel gazers within the party right now is to get their heads out of their navels and really tune in to what the American people are saying going forward about all of this, putting it in context of the economy and health care and all those big issues. It's not enough for Mitt Romney to come out and say that this is insufficient, that this is unconstitutional in our view or whatever. It is now incumbent on his team to lay out a clear alternative to Obamacare. If you don't want this, if the House is going to strike it down next week in a vote, then you better be prepared to put something on the table for those independent voters out there, particularly the moms out there who's got a sick child at home or who's caring for a parent who has still a lot of questions about all this. If you're not answering those questions, you're going to have a real problem.
Going to even happen? We're going to hear any clear policy outlines from Mitt Romney's campaign before November. That doesn't seem to be part of the strategy.
The strategy has been to make this election a referendum on the president and to leave as much of the future agenda fuzzy as possible and make it all about President Obama. This, one of the unintended consequences for the Romney campaign is that this may make that impossible, right? If they vote to repeal, now what?
Well, the thing is, it used to be repeal and replace.
Right.
And now it's just repeal. So they're going to strike down all these popular provisions, be on record as saying, we're for throwing your kid off your policy without telling you what we would do to keep your kid on your policy. So, I mean, I understand why they're doing it for the base, but I think they're setting themselves up for a counter-argument that may neutralize what they think is an advantage.
Can I talk about this Eric Holder thing?
Yes, I was going to ask.
Look, I think that the Republicans get a win out of this because they put the focus on an attorney general who has not been politically adroit most of his term. He just doesn't. He's not a politician, Eric Holder. He just isn't.
But nor should he be, though.
He gets the worst jobs in the world. He has to handle, like Guantanamo and all these issues.
Voter
that are
ID.
tough. But the Republican Party, I mean, if I were running the Obama campaign, I'd point out the fact that Romney is not Romney. He's a prisoner of Zenda. He's been held. Grover Nordquist owns him on tax policy. The neocons, led by Dan Senor and the whole crowd and Robert King, own him on foreign policy. He'll push the button on Iran the day they tell him to. The religious right just gave him his big honorary degree down at Liberty, so-called Liberty. I should say Liberty, so-called university down there. He's got that. He's bought in there. And now the NRA has put the handcuffs on the guy. He is totally owned. And the day he pulls his sister soldier moment, the day he stands up to one of those 5 forces of the Republican Party, will be the first day he's done it. The man is completely sold out to the right on all the issues that matter. I don't think he's a right-winger. I think most Americans I talk to think he's sort of a pragmatic business guy. His current business is politics. But he has sold so many, he signed so many papers.
Don't forget immigration.
With so many guys.
And don't forget immigration.
With the right. But I don't know who the right-wing force is, except just anti-immigrant.
The Tea Party base.
Well, but he's adopted the rhetoric of magnets and illegals.
Is there a Mitt in that Mitt Romney? Is there a person in there that says, no, I'm not there on this? No, waitress, I'd like to make a change for the orange juice. Could I have tomato juice? Just one time. Don't take the blue plate special.
His dad walked out of the 1964 convention. You might remember this. I don't. But he walked out of the 1964 convention because he opposed Barry Goldwater's position on civil rights, opposing civil rights legislation.
Would this guy do it?
Would he do it? I mean, he's inherited his father's hair, but not his spine.
Mark, are you...
You've been saving that for how many hours?
He's had that chestnut in his pocket. Mark, are we going to see that Mitt Romney if he is in fact the man that Chris presumes him to be?
Well, I think we've got to, if he has any chance of winning the election in the fall. I think it's really true that I've been waiting for one of those moments myself. I had hoped to see that on immigration. I know there's got to be an evolution on that issue, as well as a number of others. He's got time. No question about it, but the cement is starting to harden on perceptions about him, and I think Chris makes a great point. It's something that bothers me as I've watched the campaign, is that I haven't seen any real independence on his part to step away from a lot of the special moneyed interests that are imposing themselves on the party, and so I want to see where Mitt Romney would go and where he's really willing to step out and say, here's my plan, here's where I lead without somebody pulling me around by a leash.
And it's hard to do this, George Sr., everybody loves George Sr. now, but look how he was whacked. George Herbert Walker Bush. Remember how he made his promise, because Peggy Noonan wrote the speech down in New Orleans, read my lips, no new taxes. Yeah. And the minute he cut that fiscal deal back in 90, he, with Darman and Baker and those guys, he was whacked and pillaged through history since then.
That was it.
And
you broke your deal with the right. So it's not so easy to break these shackles once you cut these deals.
And let's keep in mind, as the Supreme Court handed down its decision, the Romney campaign started tweeting out the fact that they were getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations.
Well, that's what they said.
Okay.
You don't think that it planned?
But setting aside the actual fiscal reality.
We don't know if they raised the nickel.
The reality is the Romney campaign.
The two guys gave the $100,000 that they committed to last week.
Moneyed interests, as Mark said, play a huge role in dictating.
But that cuts both ways. I mean, the Obama team had, I'm sure as well, their political operations prepared should this have fallen the other way.
The Jim Messina fundraiser email went out before the decision. Right. I got it. You got it right. Messina sent it out this morning.
So we're not going to blame these guys for the politics of what their campaigns are going to do to get the money in the door. We know how that's played. But I think the broader question for both of these men right now is, how do they frame this argument? I think Mark is right. Romney has time, but the cement is hardening. And I would say it's actually hardened on some issues like immigration, where it's going to be really hard to pull the Hispanic vote now in a direction towards the party. Can you afford to let the cement harden on this issue, for example?
Where has Romney demonstrated leadership? He did it when he was the governor on the mandate issue. But where has he since? I think the president's statement that we talked about earlier today, he talked about his idea of leadership. He had to change his mind in order to do this. It was not political. It was not politically popular. It
was anything but politically
popular. Rahm Emanuel, every day, Rahm Emanuel came in his office and said, "Mr. President, there's a way to go smaller here," and he would say no. So he gave a vision of leadership.
This is the narrative. You give this, noble aspiration to Obama making this move without any political calculation at all, where if Romney makes those kinds of moves, you're the first one out here saying that he's flip-flopping on an issue. But this goes to the broader point of definition. Of how these guys have allowed themselves to be defined. And I think Romney, up to this point, has ostensibly been defined as someone, if he changes his mind, it's a flip-flop. If Obama changes his mind, it's growth, it's progress, whether it's on immigration.
It's the nature of the change.
Long, Mike.
What?
It's so long. It's so well established on so many of these issues, from being pro-choice to being for his health care plan, which included a mandate. There isn't a single example of a time where he took on the base of his own party.
But why? It's also
as a candidate for president.
Yeah, but it's why do you change? The president explained his change to make health care work. I looked at the policy.
But that's my point. I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. He hasn't made that counter argument in the context.
He did something that was politically unpopular. What we see with Romney's changes, they tend to be towards the side of pandering. I
disagree with that.
But I mean, surely you understand the point that inside the sort of guise of Mitt Romney presidential candidate is probably a moderate Republican
screaming, trying to get out.
Can I ask a big question?
It's like the movie Alien.
That he can't, whatever his natural instincts are, it doesn't matter. He's sold his decision-making authority to the interest groups in the Republican Party, and independents who think, well, I think he's instinctively a moderate, better look very closely at what his how much latitude he'll have in governing, given the way he's running this campaign.
He can't flip on abortion again.
Right, ever.
He can't take a 10-to-1 deal. He said he wouldn't. Very specific commitments.
Right.
No, it's true. He and Simpson Bowles versus the Grover Norquist tax pledge. It will be an interesting campaign season. Thank you to everyone involved in this massive broadcast. David, Chairman Steele, Chris, Dee Dee, and of course Mark McKinnon over there in Austin, Texas. You can of course catch Chris tonight on Hardball at 5 p.m. Eastern here on MSNBC, the authority for all things.
Right across the room here.
Right? That's all for us here now. I'll see you back in New York tomorrow.